Today, we're going to make pulled pork. We start with the rub. 1/4 cup turbinado sugar, 1/4 cup paprika, 2 tablespoons of salt, and 1/4 cup of ground black pepper. You need to grind it yourself. There's no substitute for freshly ground black pepper. This is a Boston butt, which is part of a shoulder. Boston butt is not a particularly beautiful butt. It's got a lot of connective tissue and a lot of fat, and that's why it's well suited for slow cooking. This fat will render down, the connective tissue will break down, and that's what results in the pulled pork that we know and love. As much as we love this big layer of fat on top, the top part of the butt, I'm gonna trim it a little bit because it's a little too much for me. There's plenty of other fat that's still in the meat that's gonna make this nice and tender when it cooks. So for that, I'm using a sharp knife, and I'm just gonna kind of slice down some of the fat so that there's not so much of it. You can pour the rub on top of this. You don't want to skimp on the rub in this case. This is not something you want to sprinkle on. It's something you want to get a nice layer of it. You want to coat it really well. This is a pretty big piece of meat. It's going to break down when it's cooking. It's thick, as you can see, and it can handle a lot of seasoning without the final product being over seasoned. If you find places where there's a seam in the meat, I'd like to put it inside there and rub it around a little bit, massage it in. We just don't have to get terribly fussy about this particular cut of beef because it's not a fussy product. We're gonna give this about 24 hours in the refrigerator covered with plastic wrap to let the seasoning kind of sink in, let the flavors penetrate the meat a little bit. So now the butt has been sitting in the refrigerator for 24 hours. It's about 8 o'clock on a beautiful spring morning, April Fool's Day, but I'm not fooling. We got a nice hot charcoal fire going. I'm gonna close the lid and I'm gonna try and damp it down, sort of slow down the heat a little bit. I wanna let it level off and get it back to about 250 or so. I've damped the fire down so that the heat is a lot lower than it was before. This is our butt. So now what I've done here is I've taken a cast iron skillet and I'm gonna take the butt and I'm gonna put it on top of this cookie rack to help kind of keep it up off the surface, and so it gets plenty of exposure to the smoke in the smoker. Now I've got my fire, I've got my butts ready to go. I'm just gonna take just a small oak log, and that's gonna produce some smoke for me. And then I'm gonna go ahead. And that thing, I think the fire's low enough that the fire should be low enough that the So now I've got my oak log. I've got the fires nice and low. You can already smell the smoke coming off of it. I'm gonna just take the butt. I'm gonna put the butt in here in the center of the grill. Then I'm gonna close the lid, and I'm gonna have to check the heat here. You can see it's gonna take a second to heat back up, but I wanna get it back up to just around 200 degrees, and we'll see if we can get some nice smoke coming out of the top of the smoker. And that's where we'll wanna have it stay until it's done, which is gonna take a while. So please be patient. It's been about 3 hours. We're holding steady at just over 200 degrees, which is really good. Right where I want to be. And now we can see that we're starting to get a little crust and some color. The butt is shedding some liquid. This is not a good time, however, to mess with it. It looks good, it looks done, but it ain't. Don't touch it, don't breathe on it. Don't even maybe look at it, just let it set for a while. It's got a long, long way to go. It's about 6 o'clock p.m. This thing's been going for about 10 hours now, and now it's looking pretty good. And you can sort of, see how, I barely touch it, my finger goes into it, so. It's pretty close, but I'm gonna let it sit for a while longer. Can't overcook it. It's been about 11 hours. Still a finger mark from my finger test earlier. Looking good. Sun's going down. Maybe give it another hour. We'll see. All right, it's almost 9 o'clock. This beauty's been out here for 13 hours and we're gonna pull it off the heat and have a look. We're back and our butt has been on the smoke for about 13 hours now and it's looking mighty nice. And you can see that it's already kind of starting to fall apart. This is what a butt looks like when it's been cooked properly. This is how you can tell you're ready to pull it apart. You can just work it apart with whatever you got. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You can see you got a mixture of the soft pork that's from the inside of the butt, and then you also have some of these harder, kind of crunchier, burnt skin from the outside, which has a lot of the flavor in it, and which is also where a lot of the smoke was picked up. You can also see that the pink color here in the pork is from the smoke. That's the smoke ring that comes from the smoke. So we'll pull it apart like this, kind of nice. Seeing it nice and kind of chopped up. This is pulled pork. All right, so we've made our barbecue, we made our pulled pork. Now I'm gonna make some sauce. I have some outstanding Kroger brand vinegar here, which I know is not organic. And we can just kind of keep this between us that I'm using this vinegar, but since we are under the threat of a pandemic, I didn't think it would make any sense at all to go out to buy fresh vinegar. So I got a cup of white vinegar. You could use cider or red wine or whatever else you want. I'm gonna put, this is a half a cup plus of brown sugar. And I got a little of my rub mix in here. I'm gonna put some of that in to kind of spice it up. And I'm gonna put a little bit of this, a little bit of fat from the pork I'm gonna put in there too. Just to give it, maybe I'll put a little bit more of that, just to give it some smoky flavoring. I happen to have a sweet tooth, so I like to make it a little bit sweet, even though I also happen to like a vinegar sauce. And we'll heat this up and cook it and let that brown sugar melt, and maybe put a little squirt of water in there before I put it on the burner. All right, so here's our vinegar sauce. The great thing about pulled pork though is that you could season it Mexican style. You could season it with garlic and oregano. And you could break it down the way I did and put tomato sauce in it and cook it like a ragu and put it on top of pasta. It's a very versatile piece of meat. It's cheap, it is tasty, people love it, and it's really easy to cook without screwing it up, but you gotta put in the time. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Got a little bit of pulled pork, a little bit of nice vinegar sauce. It's got a little bit of a sweet character to it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pulled pork from COVID Cooking with the Wombat. And it's tasty. Enjoy.